Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Our television does that. It's insane.
Well, here we are. We're back again. We missed last week. I didn't think we'd be meeting last week, but I never did know. And so I had two lesson plans planned for last week and this week, and that's why I didn't know. So I kind of give you a hint as to where we'll be next week, right? So we'll be in Habakkuk next week. So, but this week we're going to be in Daniel. We're doing some more apocalyptic information. Hopefully it doesn't get too confusing. I know it does a lot of times, but
Are there any cubits in it?
no cubits.
We'll be all right.
No cubits, but you'll hear time, half time. You'll hear times. You'll hear those kinds of things. So, and there will be probably, it's going to sound a lot familiar if you've ever read Revelation at all, Revelation of John. You're going to hear some very similar things. And all I can say about the comparison between Daniel and John's Revelation is they seem to be in a mirror. They kind of go backward. So, but I won't get too much into that. That's not the plan. We focus on the kingdom here, the kingdom of God here now, and working towards that. We don't worry about what's happening then, kind of thing. So, okay. So, as we get ready to go, let me find my share screen here, and we'll get going. Share. And do this so everybody can see the screen, the whole screen and nothing but the screen. So help us God. Okay. So if someone wants to read now, the last time we met, we went actually through Daniel 11 verse 1. So we're starting in verse 2 today, because all it really did was verse 1 is just kind of a carry out. Daniel did this until the reign of Darius. So here we are with Darius now. And there's been a dream and all that, and or a vision that Daniel is seeing, and he's been visited by this man of bronze. Some people say, like I do, that it's Jesus Christ. Some people say it's an angel. But regardless of who it is, there seems to be a switch at some point during what we read the last time that we were here in Daniel 11 or Daniel 10. And all of a sudden, now there is an angel. I'll see that. Okay. So whether it was an angel to start with, and it's the same angel continuing, or whether it was Jesus, and all of a sudden now we've got an attendee of Jesus, another angel. There we go. So here we go. So this angel is now talking to Daniel, or this man of bronze, or the other man that he sees. So verse 2 through 4.
And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia, and then a 4th will gain far more riches than all of them. And soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he will arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece.
Get the realm of who?
Greece.
Oh.
And a mighty king will rise, and he will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. But as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out toward the 4 points of the compass, though not to his own descendants, nor according to his authority, which he yielded, for his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to others besides them.
Okay.
Alexander?
Paul, yeah. Who do you think that sounds like?
Alexander.
Sounds very similar to Alexander.
Yeah.
So 5 and 6.
The king of the south will become strong, but one of his commanders will become even stronger than he is, and will rule his own kingdom with great power. After some years, they'll become allies. The daughter of the king of the south will go to the king of the north to make an alliance, but she will not retain her power, and he and his power will not last. In those days, she will be handed over together with her royal escort and her father and the one who supports her.
You're a little ahead of yourself, but you're on the right track.
Trying to
Yes.
think who the queen would be.
The daughter of the king of the south to make an alliance. But yes, you're definitely on the right track.
The Mede.
Hmm?
I'm trying to think what it was. When the kingdom was broken up, you got Ptolemaic, the Medes, and somebody else. There's
The
four, look at
solutions.
4 areas.
That's,
Right, but
So-
that's all before
solutions.
that's all before the Roman era. And
Yeah.
of course,
It
Cleopatra,
comes later,
Mark
yeah.
Antony, yeah, Julius Caesar,
Antiochus
yeah, we're
Epiphanes.
before that.
Mm.
But you're on the right track, yes. So 7 through 9.
One from the family line will arise to take her place. He will attack the forces of the king of the north and enter his fortress. He will fight against them and be vicious. He will also seize their gods, their metal images, and their valuable articles of silver and gold and carry them off to Egypt. For some years, he will leave the king of the north alone. Then the king of the north will invade the realm of the king of the south, but will retreat to his own country.
Does this make any sense, Paul?
Yeah, I tried to think who the kings were. I'm not getting anywhere.
Well, the Bible don't give us names, so.
my footnotes do.
Yes, go ahead, read your footnotes.
There's a bunch of them. All right.
Only the pertinent ones.
Well, the beginning and two, here comes a remarkable section of detailed prophecy. First about Persia, then Alexander the Great, the Ptolemies, the Seleucids, until Antiochus Epiphanes.
Mhm.
That's who it is.
And,
Antiochus Epiphanes.
all right. Then 3 and 4, mighty King Alexander the Great. 5, this section traces the various struggles between the kings of the south, the Ptolemies of Egypt, and the kings of the north, the Seleucids of Syria. The king of the south in this verse is Ptolemy the First, who ruled Egypt, and one of his princes was Seleucus
Seleucus, yeah.
Seleucus I Nicator, whose kingdom eventually stretched from Palestine to India.
Probably run into is if you think of the north, I think of Greece, you then go south Egypt and all that, but it's over here in what we call Middle East now.
Correct.
So
Ptolemy,
that's, when we talk about the king of the north, it's the Middle East
That's
north,
that.
not the north that we.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, we're talking about a fairly small
Yeah.
region of area. Of course, Alexander the Great conquered quite a bit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
right, the Seleucus the First Nicator,
Mhm.
right, extended his quite a ways, but it was not. It was more linear as opposed to, or it was more longitude. Is that right? Latitude, longitude, horizontally.
longitude
That's what-
goes up and down, latitude goes
Yeah.
around.
Okay. So 10 through 12.
His sons will prepare for war and assemble a great army, which will sweep on like an irresistible flood and carry the battle as far as his fortress. Then the king of the south will march out in a rage and fight against the king of the north, who will raise a large army but will be defeated. And 12, yeah. When the army is carried off, the king of the south will be filled with pride and will slaughter many thousands, yet he will not remain triumphant.
And what do we call that when, well, it's already written there. Will be filled with pride, yet he will not remain triumphant.
That pride gets you every time.
Mhm. Okay, 13 through 15.
Let me try that. For the king of the north will muster another army to larger than the first, and after several years, he will advance with a huge army fully equipped. In those times, many will rise against the kings of the south, the king of the south. The vision, the violent men among your own people will rebel in fulfillment of the vision, but without success. 7:15, is that?
Mhm.
Then the king of the north will come and build the siege ramps and will will capture a fortified city. The forces of the south will be powerless to resist. Even their best troops will not have the strength to stand.
Okay. Now, this is talking about the time, what we call the intertestamental time. We're
Mhm.
talking about the time of the Maccabees.
Mhm.
So, that one page between the end of Malachi and the beginning of Matthew, that one page is equivalent to about 400 years. And in that 400 years, you've got Alexander the Great, you've got the rise of the Ptolemies and Seleucids, you've got the rise of the Roman Empire and all that in there. So what we're talking about here happens to take place during that Maccabean time.
What's the city they take? You know?
Well, we're going to be talking about Jerusalem.
I was wondering if it was Jerusalem.
Antiochus for Epiphanes, he takes over the city. He takes over the temple. He ransacks the temple, but then he goes in and he defiles the temple by slaughtering a pig within the temple
Okay.
in deference to himself.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not until the Judas Maccabean revolt that happened several years after that they reclaim the city. They cleanse the temple, and then we start getting the Herods. Okay. So,
Oh, joy.
well, you know, the Herods were, if you ever watch Harry Potter or know about the Harry Potter franchise, you've got these full-blooded wizards, and then you've got these what they call mudbloods, which are they're humans or wizards of mixed non-wizard plus wizard, that kind of thing. They're called mudbloods. Those who are wizards who have no powers are called squibs, by the way. But that's just a side point. So Herod is a mudblood. He has just the trace amount of Jewish line in him. And when the Romans take over, they make the Herods, they put the Herods in charge. He comes from the Hasmonean line. The Hasmoneans play a large part in the rebuilding of Jerusalem after the Judas Maccabean. Okay, so the Herods take over, and Herod the Great did a lot of wonderful things, but you know, pride gets them every time.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, they think they're bigger than what they really are. So, what we're hearing about here so far is taking place during that intertestamental time. 18 through 20.
Then he will turn his face to the coastlands and capture many, but a commander will put a stop to his scorn against him. Moreover, he will repay him for his scorn. So he will turn his face toward the fortresses of his own land, but he will stumble and fall and be no more found. Then in his place, one will arise who will send an oppressor through the jewel of his kingdom. Yet within a few days he will be shattered, though neither in anger nor in battle.
Anybody know what happens there? We don't know exactly who this is in reference to, but we have an idea that if y'all remember, Herod was, he basically ate himself to death.
Oh,
There's a glutton.
He was a glutton, yes. So it seemed most scholars believe that this is what that's talking about. Yeah, he's destroyed, but not in anger or in battle. He kills himself by eating too much.
well, my footnote says for 15 to 20, Antiochus III the Great defeated the Egyptian army in Sidon. He came to terms with Ptolemy V and gave him his daughter in marriage. He annexed the coastlands of Asia Minor and unsuccessfully tried to invade Greece. He was defeated by the Romans at Magnesia in 190 BC, but was forced to pay tribute and soon died. He was succeeded by his son, Seleucus IV, Philopator, who heavily taxed the people of Israel.
Okay.
He wasn't very much loved, I imagine.
Nope, I would think not. Nobody likes taxes.
Nope.
His alias was Joe Biden.
So I can't delete that off the video, so.
You got to remember that's there forever.
Yeah, it's there forever. 21 through 23.
He will be succeeded by a contemptible person who is not given the honor of royalty. He will invade the kingdom when its people feel secure, and he will siege it. Then an overwhelming army will be swept away before him. Both it and the prince of the covenant will be destroyed. After coming to an agreement with him, he will act deceitfully, and with only a few people, he will rise to power.
Okay, now is this Herod we're talking about now?
We'll have to see.
Oh,
It can apply to, that's the one thing about some of
That
these,
fit a lot of people.
Yeah.
it fits a lot of situations, but we still think, based on what we've heard so far, we still think this is during that same time frame. Okay, 24 and 25.
You're gonna
We forgot
join
you
us.
had your plans.
Yay.
I forgot I had my plan. I told them we were going to be in Habakkuk and we were in Daniel, so. Okay, so 24 and 25, if someone wants to read that.
When the richest provinces feel secure, he will invade them and will achieve what neither his fathers nor his forefathers did. He will distribute plunder, loot, and wealth among his followers. He will plot the overthrow of fortresses, but only for a time. War?
Yes.
Okay, with a large army, he will stir up his strength and courage against the king of the south. The king of the south will wage war with a large and very powerful army, but he will not be able to stand because of the plots devised against him.
Okay. Right now, we're in Daniel, but we believe this is a vision that Daniel's having from an angel that's giving him this vision. They're talking to him. And we believe that what this is all in reference to is that intertestamental period between that one page, that one blank page between Malachi and Matthew. There's a 400 year, what they call 400 streaming years. And this is a prophecy of what's going to happen during that time frame. Of course, parts of Daniel are believed to have been written in the 1st or 2nd century AD, so this could be already a self-fulfilled prophecy. Yeah. So 26 through 28.
Those who eat from the king's provisions will try to destroy him. His army will be swept away and many will fall in battle. The two kings, with their hearts bent on evil, will sit at the same table and lie to each other, but to no avail, because an end will come at an appointed time. The king of the north will return to his own country with great wealth, but his heart will be set against the holy covenant. He will take action against it and then return to his own country.
Okay, so before we move on, we're actually going to move backward a little bit, but in verse 28, you'll see his heart will be set against the holy covenant. That is the covenant of God with the Jews. Okay, so this is a fella who is going to be set against that godly covenant that God made with the Jews. Okay, so we are in the time of Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes. That's where we're at right now. But yes.
Is that the covenant after the flood? Between God?
No, this would be there's a lot of different covenants. Yeah, we've got time.
Okay, I don't want you getting.
No, it's okay.
I was
We
just
can-
trying to make sure I understood.
We can go backward a little bit. So there are a lot of covenants. There's one covenant that God made, okay? But it has different, it takes part at different times to different people where it gets not added to, but you get more detail about what it is. So the first covenant made is the Adamic covenant, the covenant God made with Adam. And then when Adam and the woman, it never mentions Eve at that point. It says Adam and the woman, they fall. And so that covenant gets broken from the human side of things, but not from God's side of things. So the covenant that God made still remains. Then you get into the Noahic covenant, Noah.
No, okay.
The world gets worse and worse and worse. And then Noah and his Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their 3 wives. So 8 people, and all these animals, at least according to the story, survive. And from them come the rest of the world. So our most common ancestor, at least biblically, is Noah.
Is Noah, not
Not
Adam.
Adam,
Oh, that's
okay?
interesting.
So I'm just throwing that out there, right?
Oh, that's
But the covenant that God made the covenant with Noah. What he added to the covenant with Adam that he made was that the earth would never be destroyed by a flood again. Okay, so that was just a clarification of the covenant. We move forward. Now we've got the Abrahamic Covenant, and that's the big one because it comes with it clarifies 3 things: that you will have land, you will have descendants, people, and you will be a blessing. There will be a blessing. Those who bless you will be blessed. Those who curse you will be cursed. That's the clarification there. After that, many, many years, now you get the second big one, the Mosaic Covenant. And with Moses, we get the Ten Commandments, and this is a way for people to live. This is a way for people to remain righteous, to remain in God's good favor. That's what the covenant was made for. And that's what the law was made for. That's where the Pharisees later on, where they come into play, the Pharisees meant well. Their job was to find loopholes in the covenant in order for people not to be wrong with God. So when it talks about their animals falling in a well, here's a loophole. If it's not considered work, if that happens.
To rescue
To rescue something. And of course, Jesus comes along, he takes that story and you get these parables about these things. So we're at the Mosaic Covenant. Then we get the I think it's called the Zerubbabel Covenant, after they return back from exile. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. The Davidic Covenant. That's another big one. And that is that the line will always remain. The line of David will always remain. That's the clarification of that part. And so that carries on to when Jesus arrives. And that's why Matthew gives one line of succession descendancy, and Luke gives another, but they all, one of them goes through Mary, one of them goes through Joseph, but they all fall back to David. They're both descendants of David. That's why they went to Bethlehem, because it was the city of David. Okay?
And they didn't even have ancestry.com.
No, but look at the records. So that's the Davidic Covenant. Then you get the Zerubbabel Covenant. Some people may call it the Hezekiah Covenant, but it has to do with the rebuilding of the temple after the exile. And we are at that point right now. Okay, we're kind of in the middle of that in our reading. After that, the next covenant is it, and that is the new covenant. And that's the clarification of Jesus as both human and both divine, both human and divine, that we are made in the image of God, and that we are beloved by God, and that God has made this way, after all those rules I gave you before, for you to remain in my good graces.
You just said something that piqued my interest.
My son is coming, and he will be the atonement for all of those sins.
Okay, you just said something that's interesting.
Okay.
You said Jesus was human and divine. How come you didn't say divine first and then human?
Well,
I'm saying that because that's actually the split between the Orthodox and the Western Church.
Oh my
Yep,
gosh.
it is.
there are some people that believe that just a choice of words.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
it makes no difference because he was both.
Do you?
Well,
There are some that will argue, are they equal?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is his human side and his divine side equal? I don't think so, but how do you become fully human and fully divine? Well, the reason I don't think they're equal is divinity always is better than human. But
Oh, I know.
I just said
We were in Eastern Europe several times and I talked to tour guides about that, and they said, yes, Jesus Christ was a human being and then he became divine.
Oh.
that's really that's a great discussion
It
for
is.
another
Yeah,
time.
But I mean, seriously, that's the way you phrased it.
Yeah.
Was very
Just
interesting.
the way I said it.
Yeah.
Just the way I said
I'm
it.
not jumping
Mike.
on you, don't get
Come
me
on,
wrong.
Michael, think before you engage. Now, real quick, which covenant that you just mentioned?
This is saying the Holy Covenant. So this is all the way up to the Zerubbabel Covenant.
Okay, thank you.
Now I say that because I'm going to go back a slide. I'm going to go back 2 slides. You will see in verse 22, but then an overwhelming army will be swept away before him. Both it and a prince of the covenant will be destroyed. That prince of a covenant, that's the same covenant. A prince of the covenant would be a priest.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out what that could mean. Okay.
Okay, so now we move forward. So 29 through 31.
At the appointed time, he will invade the south again, but this time the outcome will be different from what it was before. Ships of the western coastlands will oppose him, and he will lose heart. Then he will turn back and vent his fury against the Holy Covenant. He will return and show favor to those who forsake the Holy Covenant. His armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress. Oh, shoot, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I lost my place. And will abolish the daily sacrifice. Then they will set up the abomination that causes desolation.
Okay. The abomination that causes desolation.
The western covenant, western.
That the abomination that causes desolation is two references. It's used two times. It's used for the Antiochus IV Epiphanes defiling the temple by sacrificing a pig within the temple during that 400 years. The second time it's mentioned is in John's Revelation, and it refers to the Antichrist taking over or creating a world religion.
Who are the western, from the western coastlands?
That would be the Egyptians, the Ptolemies.
Okay, I can go along with the geography speaking, yeah.
Okay. 32 through 35.
32. Okay, let's see here. With flattery, he will corrupt those who have violated the covenant, but the people who know their God will firmly resist him. Those who are wise will instruct many, though for a time they will fall by the sword to be burned, captured, or plundered. To where 34?
Through 35.
That when they fall, they will receive a little help, and many who are not sincere will join them. Some of the wise will stumble, so that they may be refined, purified, and made spotless until the time of end, for it will still come at the appointed time. Don't get mad.
Okay. So this is where scholars start getting divided. That phrase, the abomination of desolation, or the abomination that causes desolation. Some scholars get split now. Now they say, okay, now with that phrase alone, we're starting to see the prophet Daniel see things at different times. And so this could refer to three different events.
Whoa.
Number one, it could refer to the Maccabean revolt. It could refer to the destruction of the temple in AD 70 by Titus, or it could refer to the end times. To the end times.
Wow.
So depending on which scholarship you start to follow, depends on how you would interpret this. I am going to, for the sake of the class, stick with what we've already been talking about, and that is that Maccabean time frame. Okay, but keep in mind what happens to the disciples, to the Jews, to Christians during that time around AD 70, and also keep in mind what you personally know about or feel about the end times, okay, and what you've read in Revelation. So keep that in the back of your mind, but we're going to stick with the Maccabean era at this point.
Okay.
Okay, so 36 through 38.
You want to read that?
Okay, do you want me to use this version?
Sure.
Or
You
no?
use whichever version you want.
Well, y'all can read that and hear the
Read the Persian version.
Persian.
The king who praises himself. The northern king will do whatever he wants. He will brag about himself. He will praise himself and think that he's even better than a god. He will say things that no one has ever heard. He will say those things against the God of gods. He will be successful until all the evil things have happened. That then what God has planned to happen will happen. 37 too?
Through 38.
The northern king will not care about the gods his ancestor worship. He will not care about the gods women worship. He will not care about any God. Instead, he will praise himself and make himself more important than any God. The northern king will not worship any God, but he will worship power. Power and strength will be his God. His ancestors didn't love power as he does. He will honor the God of power with gold and silver, expensive jewels and gifts.
That's good.
Stop.
Stop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's the interesting thing. So many of these, I call them dictators, despots, think that they elevate themselves to
Well, they
God.
do.
Yeah.
That's the first
Oh,
thing
yeah.
they do.
Yeah.
So, right,
Or
this,
elevate themselves
this
above God.
definitely fits in Tyche's 4 epiphanies.
Yeah.
This definitely fits him. Okay. So 39 through 40.
And he will take action against the strongest of fortresses with the help of a foreign god. He will give great honor to those who acknowledge him, and he will cause them to rule over the many, and will parcel out land for the price, for a price. And at the end time, the king of the south will collide with him, and the king of the north will storm against him with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships, and he will enter countries, overflow them, and pass through.
Powerful.
41 through 44.
He will also invade the beautiful lands. Many countries will fall, but Ed and Mom and the leaders of the Ammons will be delivered from his hand. He will extend his power over many countries. Egypt will not escape. He will gain control of the treasures of gold and silver and all the riches of Egypt. With Lebanon and Nomads in submission, but reporting from the east and north will alarm him, and he will not set out in a great rage to destroy and annihilate.
Annihilate.
Annihilate many. He will pitch you.
Oop, I'll put there.
Okay.
So now, again, this could be in reference to a few things. I still think this is post Antiochus 4 Epiphanies, but we could start to see part of this as the Romans rising to power, Julius Caesar against Marcus Antony and such. Okay. Okay, and the beautiful land, by the way, Israel.
Who knows?
Of course. 45, or he will pitch his royal tents between the seas at the beautiful holy mountain, yet he will come to his end, and no one will help him.
Oh.
So that's really a reference that that does not seem to apply to Julius Caesar. Okay, on to Daniel 12.
But they don't name, it doesn't name the Antichrist.
Never does.
Never does.
Now, depending on who you read, if you go with Tim LaHaye and the other guy,
Yeah.
you end up with what was his name?
Carpathia?
Carpathia, Nikolai
Yeah.
Carpathia.
Carpathia.
You know, so.
Well, there are a lot of them.
And that has to do with Revelation mentioning the Carpathian Mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So verse 1 and 2 of Daniel 12.
At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt.
Okay.
Boy.
So we can derive a lot of information from these two verses. So who is talking to Daniel? The other man.
Michael.
The other
Michael,
man.
the other man,
No,
yeah.
we know it's not Michael because this other man is referring to Michael as someone
okay.
else.
It's the other man. We don't know who it is.
We also know that Daniel had a dream prior that that an angel appeared before him and said, sorry, took me a little while to respond, about 6 weeks. Took me a little while to respond because I was tied up battling the forces of evil elsewhere. Okay. And Michael was there to help me, kind of thing. So my guess, this is another, I won't say an archangel, but probably another angel of some sort that's still giving his message. And he's now, we've shifted. Most scholars now believe that we have shifted from information that could be tied to several things Now we're specifically looking at that end times event. Okay,
Here.
that, correct.
Okay.
And we're starting to see the last, what we call the Great Tribulation, which evangelicals will call that the last 3.5 years of that 7-year time frame, or however long they want to say. Okay, 3 through 5.
Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens. And those who lead many to righteousness, like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the end of the time. Many will go here, and there will be to increase in knowledge. Then I, Daniel, looked, and there before we stood 2 others, one on his bank of the river and one on the opposite bank.
Okay. So Daniel gets told to roll up and seal the words of the scroll till the end of time. Twice before, prophets have been, or people have been told to seal up things. One was Jeremiah, and the other is John the Revelator.
Hmm. And no one followed the instructions.
Well, apparently they weren't sealed very well. We found them, right? But no, it's, we don't know the whole idea of what they were told. They may not have written down any of this, although this kind of appears to. Oh, I'll go back one slide, sorry. Everyone whose name is found written in the book
Oh,
Mhm.
the book of
will
life.
be delivered. That's probably the book of life that John the Revelator mentions. Okay. And then we get this reference in verse 5 to 2 others. There before me stood 2 others. I wonder who that could be. Number 6 or 6 through 7.
One of them said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, "How long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled?" The man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, lifted his right hand and his left hand toward heaven. And I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, "It will be for a time, times and half a time. When the power of the holy people has been finally broken, all these things will be completed."
Okay.
That sounds like Jesus.
Well,
Clothed in
kind
linen.
of,
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
kind of.
I like that.
But there were 2 others.
Yeah.
There were 2 others. I'm going to blow your minds a little bit.
Okay.
Holy Spirit.
Blow it.
No. Blow your minds a little bit. In the Gospels, John the Baptist is mentioned a couple of times as, Jesus gets asked, or even Jesus.
Mhm.
People ask, well, who is he? Is he Elijah? Is he Moses? Is he one of the prophets? Then you get to Jesus' transfiguration. And who appeared with Jesus at the
Oh.
transfiguration? 2 others.
Moses.
Moses and Elijah,
Elijah.
those who appear to be Moses and Elijah.
Hmm.
John the Revelator sees 2 people that he calls witnesses,
Hmm.
and they are described as being like the prophets Moses and Elijah.
Mhm.
I believe that these 2 could be Daniel's vision of Moses and Elijah.
Hmm.
That's my thought. And then in verse 7, we get this phrase, time, times, and half a time. You have a footnote for that?
Probably. Yeah. The events of the tribulation will be consummated when the 3 and 1/2 times, the last 3.5 years of that 7-year period, come to a close. The last 3.5 years constitute the Great Tribulation.
Okay.
Matthew 24.
So the tribulation, evangelically,
Mhm.
is a 7-year time frame. The Great Tribulation takes place when, begins when the beast, the Antichrist, whoever you want to call him,
Mhm.
desecrates the temple. That's when the last 3.5 years. And the reason they say 7 years or 3.5 years is in this reference, time is believed to be, one time is believed to be a year. Times, that's multiple year, but it doesn't say how many. So we assume more than one. So we'll stick with 2. And then half a time, that would be half a year.
Mhm.
So that's where they get their 3.5 year time frame.
Oh.
But the question remains, evangelicals will say times means 2. Time means one, times means two. Other scholars will say, well, there's nothing that dictates that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this could be any number of times, but we know there's gonna be a half a year, so I mean, just based on this. When all these things will be complete.
Well, why did they settle on 7 years for this tribulation?
7 is the sign, is the number of divine completeness.
Okay.
God created the earth
In 7 days.
well,
6 days and
6
rest
days, but a day of
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah.
So, okay, so 7 is that magic number.
All right.
Okay. 8 through 11.
You gonna read that, Paul?
Oh, is it my turn? I'm sorry. I heard, but I did not understand.
Okay, is that you or is that?
Hey, guess what? I don't understand a lot of this. So I asked my Lord, what will be the outcome of this? What would, huh?
What will the outcome of all this?
this all is.
Yeah.
He replied, go your way, Daniel, because the words are closed up and sealed unto the time, until the time of the end.
Mhm.
Is that the seal that,
Mhm.
that gets open in Revelation?
Possibly.
Okay, I'm sorry. Many will be purified, made spotless and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand. How far, 12?
Mhm. Oh, through 11.
11. From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days.
Okay, somebody divide 1,290 by 360. The reason I say
7 years.
360, reason I say 360 is because that is the Jewish year. They have a 5-day feast at the end of the year.
That's the 7 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
Was that 3.5 years?
3.5.
Yes, 3.5.
7 years, yeah.
So 3.5 years. So from the time so now you see where the evangelicals follow in with times meaning 2.
Mhm.
In other places in Revelation, it gets a little more detailed. You start seeing 375 day or 365 day, or I'm sorry, 1,265 days or 1,315 days. You start getting weird numbers.
Mhm.
Well, I can tell you that based on that some scholars have taken this and they have graphed it out to the day as to what happens when. And I'm going to tell you, as Christians, we don't have to worry about this.
Yeah.
Whether you believe in a rapture, whether you don't believe in a rapture, whether you suffer persecution, whether you don't suffer persecution, we all know where this leads to in the end.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So 12 through 13.
How blessed is he who keeps waiting and attains to the 1,335 days.
Aha, yeah, it's an extra, how many days? It's an extra 45 days, guys.
Yeah. But as for you, go your way to the end, and then you will enter into rest and rise again for your allotted portion at the end of the age.
Okay, so what happens at the end of all this?
You will rest.
There's a rest period. Okay. Okay, so we've reached the end of Daniel 12. Now, Daniel chapter 11, we're going to go back to that. I should have put this earlier on, but this may make a little more sense. I don't know how well y'all can see it, maybe not. But you start to see, based on the verses, how this particular scholar, and this is how I kind of follow it, follows chapter 11. You've got Seleucus Nicator of Syria. You've got Lysimachus of Asia Minor, you got Cassander of Macedonia, you got Ptolemy of Egypt. So those are the 4 kings that you hear about. When Alexander dies, okay, and he died at the age of 32. So, okay, so these are his four
Successors.
successors. So Verse 5 talks about Seleucus Nicator and Ptolemy, a general southern, the southern kingdom, which is Ptolemy, will rule his own kingdom and become stronger. And then in verse 6, an alliance by marriage Berenice. So it was not Cleopatra. We're before that point, okay? But an alliance by marriage, Berenice of the daughter of Antiochus II, Theos, to Antiochus, or I'm sorry, Berenice, who is part of Ptolemy, Philadelphia's. And then in verse 7 through 9, we're reading about Ptolemy Euergetes, who is Berenice's brother. He'll conquer the northern kingdom. And then you have a continued warfare between the kings of the north and the south, with Israel in the middle. Okay.
So does that imply those are sons? So
They're
second,
successors. Yes, as we go down, we're succeeding the ones at the top.
Got it.
Okay. And then in verse 15, 16, Antiochus the Great will defeat Egypt and overtake the land of Israel. In 17, Antiochus gives Cleopatra in marriage for an alliance with Egypt. So that's where that falls into play. And then in 18 and 19, Antiochus the Great will war on the Western Kingdom and will return back by the rise of the Roman Empire. So that's where Julius Caesar starts to come into play. Verse 20, Seleucus IV Philopater will impose taxes on Israel, but in a few days he will be destroyed. So that does not refer to Herod. Okay, but I was giving a reference there. It could apply to several people. And then 21 through 35, Antiochus IV Epiphanes. I've said that name a lot. Antiochus IV was horrible. Okay? He was horrible. Probably the worst. He probably did the worst things to the Jews in all of history. So the rise of the little horn. Y'all remember that? Antiochus IV Epiphanes is that little horn that rose from
Yeah, on the temple.
okay,
Yeah.
who will war on the southern kingdom, but will be turned back by the rise of the Roman Empire, and then he will turn on Israel. Okay, so
Okay, well, up there in 17, it talks about Antiochus giving Cleopatra. And to whom? Anthony?
to Ptolemy Epiphanes.
To Ptolemy,
To
okay.
Ptolemy.
Well, she must have gotten around that.
It was meant, they've been warring forever.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so
That barge went a long way.
Cleo, I'll tell you what.
okay, so this leads towards the end of the chapter. This is, now you'll see, it's got, this is one scholar's version of what's happening if we take it from an end times point of view, okay? So you've got the church age, which is what we're living in, and then they believe in this rapture here. The judgment seat of Christ, now that's in blue. The judgment seat of Christ is believed to be, we'll get into this when we get further along, okay? But there's going to be a couple of judgments. One is the judgment of sheep and goats, which is specifically, I believe, for the Jews, okay? Because they're under, God did not end his covenant with them just because the new covenant came for everyone. So the sheep and the goats is for the Jews, but the judgment seat of Christ is for all those, according to this, who were raptured out. Okay? Where they will be, where, of course, if they're raptured out, what does that mean?
Well, they made it.
They made it.
They're not there anymore.
But
Yeah.
you receive some references in Peter and Thessalonians talk about receiving the crowns based on your work. So grace is what got you there, but your position in the kingdom is based on your good works. Okay, so you do good.
Okay.
And of course, this says the events in Revelation 4 and 5. This is talking about the events in Revelations verses 4 and 5. Why does it start in 4 and 5? What happens in Revelation 1 through 3? Those are the letters to the churches.
Yeah.
So, yeah, John, the Spirit, this is what the Spirit says to the seven churches.
That's the seven churches. The interesting part about it.
So according to this, if you know anything about the evangelical end time theory, And the Antichrist is revealed, signs a 7-year covenant with Israel. Okay,
The Antichrist, okay.
so this says that the rapture happens first, according to this. And then the Antichrist comes after that. I don't believe that from an evangelical point of view. There's other groups that will say that the Antichrist is revealed before then, the rapture happens after that. But regardless of how that happens, the tribulation doesn't start here. Sorry, the tribulation does not start here. It starts when the covenant is signed with Israel. And it's all about covenants, okay? These agreements, because you've got evil, in a sense, making a covenant with the good, but you don't know they're evil yet. And then the evil turning on them. And that's the history of Israel. Okay, so, but I'm not going to go too much into this, but this shows you where Daniel 11 fits in with this idea of where tribulation, where the end times fit in. And of course, this has the Abomination of Desolation written down here. That's when the Antichrist finally he breaks the covenant with Israel by defiling the temple and ending the, you will worship no one but me. So, and then you got the Great Tribulation, last 1,260 days. But what about that 1,335 days?
Yeah.
So anyway, and we were actually read 1,290 days. Remember
Yeah,
that?
that's what I was
So,
thinking,
okay. So this is just where it fits in, where Daniel fits in with that idea. So, sorry. Now, Daniel, remember we talked about several weeks ago, we talked about the weeks in Daniel, and there instead of a week of time, weeks stood for a grouping of 7 years. So a week of days would be 7 days. A week of years would be 7 years. So in Daniel earlier in chapter 9, he talks about the 70 weeks of Daniel. There will be 2 weeks of years of this, 67 weeks of this. And then that only adds up to 69 weeks of years. Well, the 70th week is believed to be that 7-year period of tribulation. Okay, so this is how they have put it in the place of Daniel. So the 70th week begins when? At the signing of the covenant. Okay. Then there's 3.5 years of tribulation.
No, the signing of the covenant, that's with who's doing the
The
signing?
Antichrist in Israel.
So it's gonna be on.
The Antichrist in Israel.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be paper.
But they don't know it's the Antichrist.
Okay, well, I was gonna say, yeah.
Okay.
It's just a ruler has risen up. He has he's a motivator. He seems to be good, just like the
Good comment.
the Pharisees.
Does he ride horseback without a shirt?
Well, that's what
Maybe.
well, they had him as a politician.
So then you've got this Abomination of Desolation here. Then you've got 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. I'm not going to go into any of this. So, this has Jesus' second coming, but yeah, Jesus during the rapture, when you read Thessalonians and Peter talk about, then we'll meet him in the clouds. That Jesus doesn't come back to earth at that point. He's in the clouds when we meet him. So we ascend just as Jesus did.
Microsoft.
Okay? Maybe. And then, so Jesus' second coming would come at the end of this, where Jesus actually returns to earth, just the way we saw him. So 3.5 years, 1,260 days. You see that asterisk there, and that's based on all these numbers. But then you see here 1,290 days. Well, that's because this is when the tribulation ends. Somebody has said that it'll take about 30 days to clean up after the war.
That seems pretty optimistic.
I'm very optimistic.
But remember who's doing it. Jesus is back.
Oh, well.
Okay?
All right.
So
Click his fingers and.
you have to have an open mind to study this stuff. Okay. and you come to your own conclusions. But so that's where the difference between the 1260 and the 1290 come into play, because there's a 30-day time of cleanup after Armageddon, where the blood ran higher than the horses' bridles, according to Revelation. Okay. And then this 1335 days. Well, that's because people who lived through the tribulation, who accepted Christ during that time, they get their judgment then. And so that takes approximately 45 days. Now, according to Revelation, I don't know whether when you do the math, it talks about there are 2 instances where a lot of people die all at one time. One is the 4th horseman of death, the pale horse, where what does it say? Where where a fourth, where the 4th horseman kills a fourth of the population of the earth. Okay, so a quarter of it's already gone. Then later on, you get this great ball of hail or comet or meteor or asteroid, whatever you want to call it, called wormwood, that destroys, that hits the planet, and it destroys a third of the earth. Well, if you add that up, that means half the population of the world has died. Because a quarter, if a quarter of it dies originally, that means that there's 3/4 left. And then a third of that. Well, that
leaves you a half.
That leaves you half. So half of the people during that, half of the world has died. So we're back to a population of about 3.5 million people. But during that time, you've got people who come to know Christ, but because they missed the rapture, they have not been judged yet. So that 45, I don't know how they figure out. I mean, why they say that's what that is, because you see what the references are. Daniel, did Daniel say any of that? Cleaning up the judgment?
No, he didn't say
No.
that.
So it's conjecture, okay? Because Revelation doesn't mention it.
Yeah.
So, okay. So next time we meet, I said Habakkuk.
You
I?
did.
We're going to be
You
in
did.
Haggai and Zechariah, because the prophets never stop.
They just keep on coming.
But we're getting close.
24/7.
We've still got Zephaniah
Always open.
and we got Malachi. But Haggai
But they're
and
short.
Zechariah.
Yeah.
They are. But like I said, because you've still got people that are still living in exile that have not returned yet, even though Darius is in charge, he has he's told them that you're going to get to go back. We're releasing you, but we're going to do it in stages. So the first group he sent back did what? The first group that left exile and went back to Jerusalem did what? They started rebuilding the temple. That was the most important part. So we're going to get people that are transitioning in groups going back to Israel. But in the meantime, you've got prophets that are prophesying to people. So one of these is going to be in Israel. One of them's still going to be in exile. What about Daniel? He ain't died yet, so he's still in exile too. So he's still prophesying too. So
Okay, you said there was the thing, but Haggai and Zephaniah and all, and the prophets haven't stopped. Okay, we as Christians say Jesus Christ is here and that's it. The Jews who don't accept Christ, don't they still have prophets?
there are prophets, yes.
Yeah, a minister tell me that there's no more prophets because Christ is here. And I'm gonna have a
Well,
little
for
trouble
the
with
Jews, they're.
Oh, my God.
Well, Well, Revelation, like I said, it would take forever to do a study.
Oh, yeah.
Because there would always be different information. It
Yeah.
would be so confusing. So you would have to start in one direction and you have to continue on that direction without including any other thoughts on it.
Yeah.
And that is nearly an impossible
It is,
task
yeah.
to completely understand. But Revelation talks about several groups of people. One is this 144,000 Jews that are sealed. Well, Some groups say that it's actual Jews. Why 144,000?
Yeah.
Well, that's 12,000 from each tribe, according to. I don't necessarily think that. I think it's going to be 144,000 who immediately believe, after they've seen the events that are happening, they come to know Christ immediately.
Mhm.
Now, why 144,000? Again, it's one of those numbers. It's a derivative of 7. It's so I think it's just this large group of people who have come to know Christ after all this has happened. And their job is like any other Christian's job, is to go and preach the gospel. And so that's their job. But they're probably held out of the holy area, because that's where the Antichrist is going to take up residence. And so God makes a way by putting those 2 witnesses there. And so these, and because these are, I hate to use the term supernatural, because they're holy beings at this point now, they can't be destroyed like the evangelists can.
The Antichrist can't get rid of them.
And in fact, Revelation says that they've got power to destroy, with fire out of their mouths, and that I'd love to see, but not really. But
No.
I'm just saying. But it just, I think it means that, when it says with fire from their mouths that it can destroy, I think it means there is nothing that people can say to them that affects them, that changes their mind, and that every argument people come to them with, they can refute. Okay, that's what I kind of think that is. But
That's reasonable.
so God, I will say God makes a way. In every circumstance, God makes a way. So I would say even after the spirit has been pulled from the earth, that's basically what the tribulation is. It's that God has left the building. Well, the spirit has left the building. God is not. So, but the spirit has left the building. Elvis, yeah, I know it's probably what you're laughing at, right? So in that case, there are still prophets. There are still people of God that exist
For the Jews.
for everyone.
Oh, for everyone. Well, why would Christians need more prophets if we already have Christ?
Well, we need people. We have to understand what a prophet's job is. A prophet's job, they have several functions. They act as judge. They act as messenger. They act as prophesier, which is just a small portion of what their job is. We call them prophets, but future prophecy is just a very small part of what they do. Their main function is messenger.
What's
The word of God, to give the word of God. Angels,
They have a task to do. don't they?
right, and you've got to understand that they cannot act on human emotion.
Oh, okay.
They're created beings just like us, but they're not human. I mean,
No.
we wouldn't call them that. I believe angels don't have a soul. That's what separates angels from humans. Angels don't. This is where it gets convoluted. Because I would say they don't have a choice, but then that means they're basically slaves to the living God. But and how would you explain Satan or the devil? If you didn't have a choice. I don't believe they have a soul. They don't die. They're created, but they're eternal. Or they're sorry. I need to get my terminology straight. They're everlasting. Eternal means they existed all the way before. They've existed all. There's only one eternal, and that's God, and every manifestation of God. Everlasting means that there's no end. There was a beginning, but there's no end. Okay. So I believe angels are everlasting, not eternal. But they were created just as we're called the sons of God. At times, they're called the sons of God, or children of God. That's what I believe, is that that's what differentiates angels from. That's what makes them that's what makes them worthy to be in the presence of God at all times. Is because some of them have a function to worship all the time, to worship. Some of them, as Michael, have a mission to protect. Some of them, like Gabriel, have a mission to be a messenger. So why the Roman Catholics have got all this down. So
They think they do.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and end the session. We'll continue our discussion. So everybody online, if you want to hear this, you need to be here. Y'all have a good day. Bye-bye.